The Go-Giver, a little story about a powerful business idea by Bob Burg and John David Mann.
Perched on the top floors of the city's tallest and most elegant office building, the regional headquarters of the Liberty Life Insurance and Financial Services Company was located right in the heart of the financial district. Most of the building's 24 floors were rented to the city's top investment companies and law firms. The 22nd and 23rd were occupied by Liberty. Sam's offices, where Joe and Pender were headed, took up the entire 24th floor. Inside the front door, Pender signed them in with the security guard. They passed through a beautifully appointed lobby and entered a tall glass elevator framed with exquisite filigree and floored with plush royal blue carpeting. "They must sell a lot of policies," whispered Joe. "This is the single most successful branch office of the single most successful financial services company in the world," Pender whispered back. "You're about to meet the person who single-handedly accounts for more than 3/4 of all the money in this particular branch that gets brought in." "You must be Joe." The beaming white-haired gentleman grabbed Joe's hand with both of his own and shook it vigorously. His voice sounded like a creaky gate hinge. "It's about time the old man brought someone around I could have some fun talking to. He's boring," and he thumped Pender on the shoulder. As Sam wheezed with laughter and led his guests to two sumptuous leather chairs, Joe glanced around the place. The vast 24th floor workspace looked more like an airplane hangar than a corporate office. The vaulted ceilings and huge skylights were at least 20 feet overhead. Through the two huge plate glass walls that formed the coroner's office perimeter, Joe could see the amazing western mountain landscape beyond the city. Joe tore himself away from the view to focus on the conversation as Pender and Sam ping-ponged through a brief history of Sam's career. Sam Rosen had started out as a struggling insurance agent. Over the years, he gained a reputation as an especially fair-minded businessman. People started calling on him to serve as a negotiator or, in their more difficult dealings, as a mediator. After establishing himself as the firm's top salesman, he broadened his focus and began serving as a full-spectrum and financial advisor for select clients. In his early 60s, Sam shifted gears yet again. He began to work with nonprofits, especially those helping the financially disadvantaged, the homeless, and the hungry. Today, Sam was the state's #1 philanthropist and spent most of his time negotiating large contracts on behalf of worldwide charities. "When I first met him a little over 30 years ago," added Pender, "he had already amassed over $400 million in sales, more by far than anyone else in the history of his company." "You must be the best insurance salesman in the world," ventured Joe. Should be, Sam agreed. "I started out as the worst. When my goal was to sell insurance, I was no good at all. My first few years in the business, I floundered like a turtle on its back. Tell you what, it was turned things around and set me right upside." Joe held up one finger and said, "May I guess? The idea of giving more in value than you take in payment?" "Not a bad guess," said Sam. "Changing my focus from seeing what I could get to what I could give was when my career started to take off." "Started to? But in business like mine, actually in any business, you also need to know how to develop a network." He looked directly at Joe. "Do you know what I mean by network?" In fact, Joe had just been thinking about that networking was something he indeed knew all about, but the question caught him by surprise and quickly shook his head. "No, I mean, yes, I think I do." He paused. "But I'll bet I don't," he finished lamely. Sam's eyes twinkled with warmth. The old man was right again, as usual. He said, "I like you." Joe blushed. Sam continued, "Now, by a network, I don't necessarily mean your customers or clients. I mean a network of people who know you, like you, and trust you. They might never buy a thing from you, but they've always got you in the back of their minds." He leaned forward and spoke with more intensity. "They're people who personally are invested in seeing you succeed, you see. And of course, that's because you're the same way about them. They're your army of personal walking ambassadors. When you've got your own army of personal walking ambassadors, you'll have referrals coming your way faster than you can handle them." Joe had always considered himself an accomplished networker, but he now found himself re-examining every business contact and networking relationship he had. Any army of personal walking ambassadors? Did that describe his network? Were all these people he knew personally invested in seeing him succeed? Did that description fit any of them? Sam spoke again, in a quiet voice this time. You want to know what makes that kind of network happen, Joe? Joe looked up and met Sam's gaze. I do. The old man's eyes bored into Joe. Stop keeping score. Joe blinked. How? How do you mean? Sam settled back into his chair. Just that. Don't keep track. That's not networking. That's poker. You know how people say win-win? Joe nodded. Always look for the solution where you both come out ahead. Sam nodded. That's right, and it sounds great, in theory. But most of the time, what people call win-win is really just a disguised way of keeping track, making sure we all come out even, that nobody gets the advantage. Even Steven. I scratched your back, so now you owe me. He shook his head sadly. When you base your relationships in business or anywhere else in your life on who owes who what, that's not being a friend. That's being a creditor. Joe remembered what he said last Friday on the phone. Come on, Carl. You owe me one. Hey, who saved your bacon on the Hodges account? Sam leaned forward again. You know what? You want to know that third law of stratospheric success? Joe nodded. Very much indeed. Watch out for the other guy. Watch out for his interests. Watch his back. Forget about 50-50, son. 50-50's a losing proposition. The only winning proposition is 100%. Make your win about the other person. Go after what he wants. Forget win-win. Focus on the other person's wins. Here it is, Joe. The third law, the law of influence. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Joe repeated it slowly. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Sam nodded, beaming. Joe hesitated, glanced at Pender, then back at Sam. That sounds like an awfully noble principle, he began, but I don't quite understand. Sam peered at him. Don't quite get how that's the law of success? Relieved, Joe nodded. Exactly. Sam looked over at Pender and nodded toward Joe as if to say, you tell him. Pender spoke up. Because if you place the other person's interest first, your interest will always be taken care of. Always. Some people call it enlightened self-interest. Watch out for what other people need, with the faith that when you do, you'll get what you need. Sam nodded and watched Joe grapple with this idea for a moment, then said, tell me, if you ask most people what creates influence, what would they say? Joe's answer came without hesitation. Money, position, maybe a history of outstanding accomplishments. Sam nodded, grinning. Ha, you're right. That's exactly what they say. And they'd have it exactly backwards. Those things don't create influence. Influence creates them. And now you know what creates it. Joe blinked. Putting other people's interests first? Sam's smile was beatific. Now you're talking. Joe followed Pender into the elevator. Side by side, they watched the doors close. As they began their descent, Pender broke the silence. How would you describe Sam? Amazing, brilliant, magnetic. Magnetic? Pender seemed to ponder the word. What about Nicole? Would you describe her as magnetic? Absolutely. One of the most striking people I've ever met. Pender looked at Joe and said, tell me, what is it about her that makes her so? Joe had to think about that. What was it that made her so striking? I don't know. She's just magnetic. Pender smiled. Like Sam? It was hard to imagine two different people than the charming young school teacher and the raspy old financier. But yes, they were somehow very much alike. And not just them. Yes, and Ernesto too. And he was going to say, and you too, but stopped short. He stared at Pender. What is it? You know, don't you? Bing! They had reached the ground floor. The door slid open and Pender gestured with his hand. After you. As they walked through the marble still in the glass of the building's majestic foyer, Pender uttered a single word. Giving. What about giving? That's what they have in common. Giving. He glanced sideways at Joe and smiled. Have you ever wondered what makes people attractive? I mean, genuinely attractive, magnetic. He pushed on the big glass door, and they walked outdoors into the warm September day. They love to give. That's why they're attractive. Givers attract. They walked silently toward his car. Givers attract, thought Joe. And that's why the law of influence works, because it magnetizes you.
The third law, the law of influence. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first.